So welcome to the Goat District. We've got a really a star-studded show here. I got the overhyped sleeper to my right on the board. Below me is CHRiS VACCARO, and then we have ABiB AGBETOBA Skywalker in the bottom corner. So I'm excited. How are you guys feeling?
Yeah, this is an awesome team. I'm interested to see how these guys are going to help break down the remaining weeks and the remaining players, like all 12 of them.
100%. Let's go, guys. I'm excited.
Goat District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
So I missed last week's Goat Districts. I was out of town. I feel like I see Dan more than just about anyone in my life during the football season. So it's really nice to see you again, Dan.
Yes,
and
I missed you, Theo.
Yeah, I totally missed you for sure. And it's you guys crushed it last week when I wasn't here, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm really happy this got put together. We have two guys who are basically honorary goats at this point, who've been on the show a number of times, but never together. A little bit of context is during the summer, CHRiS came on with Nelson Sousa, and we discussed the New York Super draft. And it was after that one, Dan and I were talking about doing these high stakes roundtables. And the first one we did was with Michael Edelman and Matt Modica, which was fantastic. And then the next one, we had one FFPC guy, known for FFPC, plays a lot of formats in Bit Mandel, and then an NFFC Hall of Famer and Billy Wazowski. And tonight we're honored because we have one guy who's taken down an overall in the NFFC, a Hall of Famer in the NFFC, and one guy who's taken down 2 overalls in the FFPC. No fantasy podcast on earth right now is putting together what we're doing tonight. Really happy to have you guys on tonight. We have CHRiS VACCARO, who does tremendous work on The Athletic, does a fantastic podcast with Nando DeFino, and then ABiB AGBETOBA, who's putting out tremendous content on First and 15 with, basically the whole First and 15 group is fantastic with Theo and CHRiS. So welcome to you both to the Goat District. We have some very sad things to talk about and some very happy things with all these injuries. Mm-hmm. But CHRiS, maybe you could start out and just tell us where we can find you these days and the work you're putting out.
Yeah, you can, if you don't find me crying on the corner of a street here in New York City. Now, you can find my work at The Athletic. Still sending out my weekly column every week. Every Thursday morning it comes out. It's a preview of the upcoming week and, discuss what's going on in fantasy. And then, like you said, it's myself and Nando DeFino put out a weekly show on the pod at The Athletic, the fantasy football show. And that's where you can find my work. And if I didn't say it at the top, it's a pleasure to be back with you guys. And it's an honor to be next to ABiB here.
ABiB, what are you guys doing lately with First and 15? Are we going to get a First and 15 before Thanksgiving, like next week? Figure it out.
I think we're going to try to get one in. Yeah, in season. It looks like we're trying to stick with the quarterly pod. So, probably every 3 to 4 weeks, we'll drop a pod, just kind of a nice review and then a look forward But definitely, yeah, 1st and 15th. You can find us on Instagram. On Twitter, and our podcast, which is on Apple, YouTube, and Spotify. During the off season is kind of really where we do a lot of the grunt work when it comes to putting out content. We try to pod at least once a week, and we'll have a couple pods here and there, and really we just try to cover it all, but just kind of in a low key, casual, argumentative format. So hopefully it's not too much for some people. We try to keep it a little bit light, but then try to, at the same time, keep things a little bit off script to some degree.
No, both of your guys' podcasts are definitely in our rotations, and they're must listen to. It's fantastic. And both of these guys are putting out content for people who listen to us for the high stakes. Both of these guys' podcasts are tremendous for that as well. And that's a space that I feel like, needs more voices in this field, and you guys certainly crush it. Dan, you have Thanksgiving coming up. You're big time in the Williamson household. How many dishes are you responsible for making next week?
So myself, I'll just be doing the turkey, the stuffing, and the gravy. Everything else gets farmed out to everybody else. So, but here's the one thing you want to know. When you're cooking that turkey, for the love of God, put it breast down. Do not cook it breast up. You're going to get a much better bird.
Take notes, people. Upside down turkey in the oven.
Upside down.
That's right.
It's a pro move.
What? Inject that bad boy.
And Dan, what is the game you're most excited for this coming Thanksgiving? Just to go over the slate, we have the Bills-Lions, we have the Giants-Cowboys in Dallas, and then we have the Patriots against your Minnesota Vikings.
Well, you know how I'm going to have to answer this one.
You got to go hometown. You got to go home.
Got to go homer, yeah. I am interested to see how the Vikings do against Bill Belichick scheming up a defense on them. You kind of feel like with the Vikings, they're a good team, but also they've been super lucky because basically every one of their victories has been in a one-score game, and most of them have been decided really late. And typically that those one-score games don't go that one-sided all the time. So. There's a little bit of variance going on there. I'm interested to see how good the team is. If that variance starts swinging a little bit the other way, and they have to either, they really have to put out a little bit more. So, but Giants and Cowboys should also be a good tilt too.
Yeah, and there are all three of them are fun for fantasy this year. So,
yeah.
Right.
ABiB, how about you? Which game are you most excited about?
All of them. Food, family, and football. No, if I had to pick one, I got to go with the points. I'm assuming that Bills Lions game will probably have the highest point spread, so expect points in that. That Thanksgiving, at least this year, I feel like we have a number of teams that are going to be in the hunt. The Lions always play on Thanksgiving, so hopefully that short week they're kind of used to it. But I like having a lot of teams in the hunt so that everyone's preparing, because I think sometimes some teams, they're not in the hunt. They just, it's Thanksgiving, family's in town. They're just looking to, try and, get through the season, and maybe, it's a blowout or one-sided. So hopefully, we get a bunch of good games. But that Bills-Lions game, I just want to see points, a lot of points.
It should be a good way to start the day fantasy-wise. Pretty soft defense for Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. And the Lions, they keep trying. It doesn't matter who's out there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it seems like it doesn't matter the personnel. They're going to at least give it their all and make it entertaining. Chris, you got to go with the Giants Cowboys, don't you? Come on.
You know where I'm going. Yeah, it's it takes me back to growing up as a kid. We used to get those NFC East rivalries in the middle of the day with our dinner coming off the big dinner, and then we sit down, and you always used to I always felt like a Cowboys and Washington, Cowboys Eagles, and I remember some Cowboys Giants games. So I was excited when I saw the schedule come out this year. My New York Giants in the middle of the day. I get my boy Saquon Barkley against CeeDee Lamb. A lot of fantasy friendly action in that game, and like you guys all said, as bad as the Lions are, number one, at least we don't get a Lions-Bears game to start the day, which I feel like we've been getting, a handful of times through these past 10, 15 years. we get the Buffalo Bills, and as bad as the Lions are, hey, we could see a lot of points in this game. I expect that total to be in the mid-50s, probably about 55 points, with Josh Allen lighting up the scoreboard if everyone stays healthy going into Thanksgiving. So nice little slate come next week.
Well, we'd all love like a 42-24 game to start the day. Yeah. Everybody's happy. And I'll go with the Giants-Cowboys. I'm excited for that one. It'll have playoff implications. And, the Giants won again. That game will be a lot of fun. And like you said, it's Saquon Barkley, CeeDee Lamb. Schultz is trending up. There's a lot of fantasy-friendly games this year. So I'm super excited for it. Just quick around the horn, what's your favorite Thanksgiving food, Dan?
As strange as it might seem, it's actually the turkey. If you do it right, it's a fantastic thing. I know a lot of places, the turkey's just kind of you got to have one because it's tradition. But if you do it right, it's really, really good. So that's always been my goal. Get that turkey right. I've had it right for about 15 years now, and love it every time.
Dan is streaking. He's on a 15-year hot streak with his turkey.
There you go. The big up turkey was an upset. I got to say, we put odds on it before the show, and no one had you.
What happened?
I was paying like 30-1, Dan.
What happens first? The Lions win on Thanksgiving, or Dan's turkey gets ruined on Thanksgiving?
That's it.
What's going to happen first?
Knock on wood. Yeah,
I guarantee you the Lions are going to win on Thanksgiving before my turkey blows up. So.
100%. Not this year, Detroit fans. Not this year.
That's right.
ABiB, how about you?
I got to go with the turkey as the 101. I got to agree with the overhyped.
Wow, man.
But it's like he mentioned it. It's got to be a well-done turkey. And it's got to have a lot of flavor. It's got to be juicy. I think people who don't like turkey, aren't eating good turkey. I think it's that simple. It's just that simple.
Yes.
But I also like, kind of aside, I like my dessert, my sides and my turkey all on the same plate.
Oh, wow.
And I like to kind of pick at it. I like the balance of the salt and sweet. I don't do it in courses. I do it all together. And then we just go for round 2, round 3, round 4, maybe, depending on how well my Sunday's or Thursday's going football wise.
Wow, that's an interesting one right there. It's a
little pie on the plate for the champ.
Man, pumpkin pie and apple pie together.
I gotta be honest though. I mean, by the time I get around all the side dishes and everything, my plate's full. I don't have room for the dessert on it.
Exactly. That's why you did it all together.
I got to eat some stuff first, and then I go back and get dessert.
What about Chris? What about Chris?
I keep it simple, boys. Turkey, but I've had my share of bad turkeys through the years, so I know what you guys are saying. A good turkey is key to the day. You have the turkey. Give me a little stuffing, good stuffing. My mother makes a great homemade stuffing. With a sweet potato, and I'm good to go until the nightcap. I sit down. I have my pecan pie, which is the only acceptable pie.
The
with
101.
It's the 101. Dan, you called it. Pecan pie. Sit down with the night game with a nice scoop of vanilla ice cream on top of that warm pecan pie, and I'm ready to go.
The only way that pecan pie would be any better is if you actually pronounced it correctly, right?
No.
Pecan.
Hey,
I know, ABiB, you're a pecan guy. Tell me you're pecan, not pecan.
Oh, I'm pecan.
Oh, there we go.
Listen, it all winds up in the same place anyway. So
exactly. Hey,
you can
you
say
add vanilla ice cream to it too.
That's right.
Tomato. I'll throw like a curveball. I enjoy like a nice sweet potato side. I like it, whether it's something salty or one of the like marshmallows on top casserole. My wife got me into that years ago, and that's one I look forward to. I like the Thanksgiving meal. It's good. I enjoy the football a little bit more. I like the family aspect, so it's definitely a great time.
Favorite day of the year for me. I don't know about you guys, but bar none, hands down, it's my favorite day of the year.
Triple headers hit different, especially with that night game. That night game is just tremendous. And this year we get the Vikings and Bill Belichick, so it's pretty cool. Getting to this past last night's game, Philadelphia had their first loss of the year, and today we learned that Dallas Goedert will miss an extended period of time. How will the Eagles adjust? He averages about 12.5 points per game in PPR, but he's very versatile in the way they use him. he got hurt on a tight end screen, and that offense has really been humming. It's a significant loss. Is there anyone that you view as someone who's going to see a bump in usage, and how do you think that offense will adjust? Why don't we start with Dan on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see anybody who's going to get a huge bump out of it. I think it's going to get fuzzed out a little bit. I could see him using, Gainwell with Miles Sanders at the same time, split them out wide. Maybe run some screens like that. You could see, a little bit more out of Devonta Smith from time to time too. He's certainly had some games where he's been awfully quiet, and I would like to think those might end a little bit with Goddard not there. But I don't know. What do you think, ABiB?
I think it's gonna, we're gonna see a lot more on Hurts' shoulder. Maybe he, a couple more design runs here or there. Maybe he, forces it a little bit more to his receiving options. I don't know how much more they can run effectively. I'm still, I'm still kind of confused with this offense as far as, I won't say confused, but trying to figure out how, to me, it's a very simplex offense, and they just seem to like run it very well, or at least, in some situations, the defense allows them to do what they want to do. And I think last night we saw the defense finally take some of those things away. Like, for the love of me, how many like in-breaking slants were just always wide open every single game, and they finally, kind of set on those or took those away. So I'm going to be interested to see what Philly does. I guess Jack Stoll was the tight end. He's been seeing some playing time this year. I guess he's more of a blocker. There's a rookie, Calcitero, or however you pronounce his name, but he's a late round rookie. If you remember from last year, I think we were all kind of high on was it Tyree Jackson? He's a little athletic. I think
there's a Tyree Jackson hive still. There are still people like
and I think he just got called up, or not called up, but I think he's a 21 window started. So who knows? Maybe there's something there. But I kind of agree with you, Dan. I think I don't necessarily know that anyone's filling into that Goddard role, and given that it wasn't one that was reliably a weekly reliable role, it may be tough to kind of find a replacement or trust one anyway.
Right.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think the Eagles are gonna, they're hitting this point now. Everything was moving along great for them, 8-0, cruising along. People were saying, "Hey, this team's gonna, wrap up the 1 seed in the NFC real quick." They're starting to hit, Avonte Maddox, their DB. He went on IR. He's hurt. Offensively, they're starting to get a little nicked up here. We want to see about AJ Brown. He limped out early. He came back in, but he didn't produce much. I don't think this team's going to get any help out of the tight end position, but where I think if we're looking for people to step up, I think Devonta Smith is going to see a lot more targets. Devonta Smith in this offense. I think he's going to be a high upside wide receiver too for this next month or so. We're still waiting on how long of we're going to be without Dallas Goedert. If I see anybody else though, take a step in this offense to become a useful piece, I think it might be Quez Watkins out of the wide receiver room. I could see him coming on the field a little bit more. I think he played 58% of the snaps last night. Maybe we see that number get up around 70. And if you're looking for some help on the wire, maybe Quez Watkins, chips in with 5-6 targets every week without Goddard there.
Quez Watkins is a nice, interesting name you bring up as well, because you bring up the fact that AJ took a little bit of a knock. I mean, I don't anticipate he's going to miss anything, but it was a scary moment. And Devonta Smith has dealt with some knocks this year as well. So Quez Watkins might have, you could view him now as, potential third fiddle in the passing game. And he's got a little bit of handcuff he's like a wide receiver handcuff, because I do think he's a talented guy, and Hurts does look for him deep. I'll be interested with the running backs. You had a very quiet Miles Sanders game. I had a team where I benched I benched Devin Singletary to play Miles Sanders, and it's like that just really hurt. And
Tough
Sanders, you're expecting a lot more than what you saw, and I think that it was also a good point that the Eagles last week against Houston, it was a 14-14 game at the half, and they ended up pulling away. So you're starting to see, a little bit of flaws in them. and Minnesota and San Francisco are kind of picking up steam. So there's a lot of pressure. I think that AJ
teams are running against them. Teams are running all over Philly now these last couple of weeks. They're showing holes in the middle of that defense. And like I said, Avonte Maddox is out now. This team, I could see them picking up a couple losses here over the next bunch of weeks. I already took Indianapolis plus the 7 points at home against this Eagle team. I think they'll lose again to Indianapolis, as a matter of fact, this upcoming week.
That'll be a big one. A shout out to Don Crypto in the chat. Jordan Davis, big loss against the run. Certainly, he's a beast, and you see Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson collectively. They try to get the ball in their hands, and I think teams have kind of figured them out a little bit. Another team that lost a big one was the Rams. Cooper Kupp. Do you think he'll play another down this season? And how should fantasy players adjust? Should we be avoiding this offense completely, or is there a sleeper that could gain some value? Start with ABiB on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Cooper Kupp is just, he's just one of those elite players that you just got to hold, even if there is the 5-10% chance that he may be there for, week 15, week 16, or you're playing in week 17, etc. I think you just got to hold. I mean, we're holding handcuffs, these, high-end handcuffs. So to me, that's a guy that when healthy may come back and Stafford's there, may put up some points. It's a big risk and a big gamble because you already kind of see the state of this team right now. They're, falling apart at the seams. The O-line has just been absolutely atrocious. It was atrocious coming into the year, and it's only gotten worse. They picked up another, O-line injury this past week. And Kupp was really the only bright spot of this offense. And Allen Robinson, oh my God, I spent the whole offseason, ragging on him, and then I finally gave in. And then this is, what has happened. So, as far as sort of kind of like who takes over, I wouldn't necessarily say stay away. I think on any bad team, there is going to be somewhat of fantasy value. We've seen that this year. Yeah. I think the talk in the offseason, I mean, we had to kind of, pick one team. It was probably the Bears as far as like there may not, there might not be enough value on the Bears or just, do an all outright fade. And that looked good early on, but now we're seeing that if you were kind of patient enough or, you were aggressive on the waiver wire, you had the advantage of having probably the number one quarterback over the last few weeks, Cole Kmet, Dan, your boy, who's really, come on strong. So I don't want to just completely ignore this situation. I will say that, at this time of year, I do look at teams as a whole. If I see a team that is just, out of contention, looks like, they're probably turning the page towards next year, I'm really starting to kind of focus in on some of the younger players, some of the guys that, that coaching staff or that, that GM may want to get a good look at. So we all, are aware of Kyron Williams. So he's a guy I think we may start to see more reps because they may want to see what they have in them. But as far as Kupp's role specifically, I think it may be our boy Skowronek. Like I really feel like he is going to fill into that role. He's not going to be Kupp, but I think he may be just enough to where like, he can provide you some PPR value. I don't know. For whatever reason, I'm looking past Allen Robinson, looking past Van Jefferson because I feel like they play their roles in the offense. I feel like, McVay has his offense and he has his skilled players play a specific role. And I don't necessarily know that there's too much interchange there. And if I'm thinking of one player that, may mimic Cooper Kupp to some degree, even though that's, not, unlikely. But if there's one player that's going to be close enough to me, it's Skowronek.
Well, I think what you're hoping for, ABiB, is that Matthew Stafford needs to have breakfast with somebody now going forward without Cooper Kupp there. And he just confuses him with Skowronek, and they start having breakfast the rest of the season together, and maybe he picks up his targets. So that's a possibility.
I mean, he does tend to lock in on one guy. I mean, Higbee, I think, will become relevant. He was, a superstar to start the year and then fell off the planet. And, obviously last week picked it up. But, so we'll probably see, uptick with him. But, Stafford does tend to kind of favor one guy. He did that in Detroit. And, maybe we'll, see this post-Kupp.
Yeah.
It's a dumpster dive. It's such an ugly scene without Kupp. I mean, you could almost say that Cooper Kupp is the most valuable guy to his team of any skill position player besides Saquon Barkley. I think it's probably Cooper Kupp. It's just crazy how imbalanced that roster is. Dan, is there anybody here that you're somewhat excited for? Higbee, Swaronic. Talk to us, Dan. Talk us off the ledge.
Theo looks like he's gonna throw up in his mouth. Ask me the question.
I have one dynasty team that was rolling. I talked to ABiB and Dan in the pre-show a little bit about how we're just numb. Like Jamar Chase injury just broke me. It's like that moment where after that it's like you can't really feel anything in terms of injuries. So like you just keep rolling with the punches. But I had one dynasty team that everything had come together. DeAndre Hopkins, Cooper Kupp, and Tyreek Hill every single week with Christian McCaffrey, and you felt great. And now it's like, what is going on here? Dan, is there anything we can get here with from the Rams?
Yeah, I mean, nothing I'm getting excited about for sure. I put out a tweet earlier today because I was looking through my teams. I found a Cooper Kupp team where I already had Ben Skoranek on there. So I did the sad dancing tweet, girl,
Yeah, it was sad.
That was pretty much my reaction. This isn't great, but I'll go ahead and dance anyway. Sure. I think ABiB's onto something with Kyren Williams too, though, because I don't think Darrell Henderson or Cam Akers is going to be with the team next year. They really need to see what they've got in Kyren Williams. So I do think that's going to happen. I do expect Higbee to probably pick up, some of the slack down underneath. It's just going to fundamentally change that offense, though. I mean, when you don't have Kupp, like we're all saying, I mean, it's just, it's not going to be the same thing because Stafford isn't going to have that one guy he can really lock in on anymore.
I like Higbee. I'll say Higbee for me would be the one where if I had him on my teams with Higbee, I feel a little bit better about it. Just out of necessity, I think he's going to have to be a thing every week, at least in terms of predictable targets. And sorry, Chris, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree. Touch on all of them real quick. Higbee, I think, is the one that gets the big bump here, especially in the tight end landscape with how terrible it is right now. And I'm sure we'll get to all that with Ertz out and Goddard out. Higbee now for the rest of the season with Kupp out of this offense is someone I think you could look at it as possibly a top 8 tight end each week. So, things were looking great in the beginning of the season for Higbee. Then they fell off of a cliff. People were dropping him. He's actually available in a couple of my high stakes leagues. And I think he'll be a big bid this week. So the arrows point up for him, but back to Cooper Kupp, we're in a really tough position as Cooper Kupp owners when you're, playing in the high stakes market because, the timetable here is 4 to 8 if he even comes back. Now, me personally, I don't know how you guys all feel. I don't think we'll see him again this year. I think this team is.
I think he's done.
I'm gonna take the other side of that. I think we do.
Yeah. Really? Okay.
Yeah, because I don't think you get that tightrope surgery if you're planning on just, mailing it in for the rest of the year.
Who was that? Tua back in the day that had the tightrope surgery, and he played in the championship game after the SEC championship where he had the surgery. That's what the one I was thinking of with that tightrope surgery. Now I know it's a quarterback,
and he was making a little bit more money at Alabama than Cooper Kupp is in Los Angeles.
Right.
Yeah.
But listen, if this team is 3-10 by the time 3-11, I mean, do they say, listen, buddy, you're going to come back for the final 3 weeks? But as fantasy players here, we're taking our playoff teams that are in good positions with Cooper Kupp here. We're taking them into the playoff spot. We need every roster spot, as we can get our hands on to set up our teams for a 3-week sprint. There's no add drops at the high stakes level once you cross that week 14 player, so we could be playing with a 19-man roster for 3 straight weeks if they shut him down after week 14 comes and goes. And you never know. You're dealing with maybe an injury or two to another guy. Those rosters, they get really short when you're playing a 3-week span without add drops throughout the playoffs. So it's tough, but hey, listen, he is Cooper Kupp. He's your first-round pick. You have to carry him. You can't drop him. So just puts us, with our hands tied behind our backs a little bit.
22
I need a screenshot for whoever drops them for their second kicker. going into the tournament weeks.
Well, shout out to the NFFC for the team kickers.
Thank God. Oh my God.
That's
that's so true.
It's a massive thing that they did. It's
yeah.
That's a whole another like knockout stage strategy. But what a gift that is. In FFPC, you're absolutely carrying two, unless you're ABiB, and then you're going to go in a championship game with zero kickers.
No kickers.
And
nobody needs kickers really.
We can't talk enough. People are going to tune out and turn off the pod if we talk about the Rams too much. Really happy news is Justin Fields has gone completely nuclear. It's unbelievable to watch what he's doing the last couple of weeks. I think he's got an opportunity to break the rushing yards record for a quarterback. I think he's playing that well. It's really happening. And what a turnaround for him, Cole Kmet, and also Matt Eberflus, who last time ABiB, you were on the GOAT district. We were just annihilating Eberflus and talking about how the guy doesn't know what he's doing. They're running the slowest paced offense. And, here we are 6 weeks later, and the guy's putting up 30 points, and, Fields is dropping 40 burgers, regularly, and Cole Kmet looks like a top 5 tight end. So lesson learned there, Dan. We never take L's in the GOAT district. Every call we make is right, except we just have to be patient. So Cole Kmet is crushing now.
Yeah.
After we cut him a couple of times, he's doing great. But where do you guys see Justin Fields in terms of the pecking order for the rest of the season? Are we talking about where does he fall? Start with you, ABiB. Where does he fall for you in terms of quarterbacks? How many guys would you rather have than Justin Fields right now, and name them?
Oh man, there's not a lot. He's playing great. So I'm not taking anything away from Justin Fields. He's kind of found his stride. And when I say great, I don't think he's kind of going through progressions and he's just so much more accurate than he was, or he's killing it in the passing game. I mean, he's more comfortable. He's running when he should run. They've adjusted the offense, and he's playing within the structure of that offense and executing very well. So he's playing great, and he's putting up a lot of fantasy points, which is what we like. So, but when I look at sort of kind of the landscape of quarterback play and the landscape of quarterbacks that we have, at our availability, there's not a lot at all, Before, I think it was last week, I had the decision between Lamar and Fields, and it was a tough decision. I went Lamar, and it was and it ended up being the wrong decision, but that's kind of where we were. So as far as kind of players that I would start above him, Mahomes and Josh Allen, those are clear. And then outside of that, I think, Hurts likely. And then I think it's close between, whoever you have available. Tua, depending on the matchup. Tua, to me, and I think we may be talking about Miami a little bit later, but I think having Mostert and Jeff Wilson there, adds a little bit, less clarity as far as it just being, purely a passing offense relying on Tua and Waddle and Hill. Now you have running backs who can also take away. So, given the matchup, there's probably 3 or 4 guys that I, for sure would start over Fields. And then after that, it just really depends on the matchup, the week, who's healthy on the given offenses and what players look like they're in their stride and is riding high.
How about you, Dan?
Yeah, so I've got a team, a dynasty team that's got Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields on the same roster. So, I mean, number one, I'm looking to sell one of them off for sure. And of course, there are some people who are like, well, I'm not paying a first rounder for in a one quarterback league. Well, fine, then you're not getting them. I mean, that's what I can tell you. But really, beyond Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, I don't know who else I would automatically start over. Maybe Hurts. Maybe. Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. Maybe. But I might be just as happy starting Fields. I'd probably be pretty matchup dependent on those.
How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I see it the same way you guys do. I have Fields 4th right now, Hurts being 3rd, and Mahomes and Allen 1 and 2. So yeah, Fields 4th. I have I talked about this on my show last week. My strategy at the quarterback position this year was my top one was to try and grab Lamar in the 6th round, and then back them up with Fields or Tua in the 16th, 17th rounds. They were pretty much free. And I had a lot of Lamar and Justin Fields teams. And after the 4th or 5th week, I said, all right, you know what? I'm not wasting any more time. I was wrong on Justin Fields. This isn't going to happen. And I dropped him. I dropped maybe 80, 90% of my Justin Fields shares. That's just the type of season that it's been. I could tell you a lot more stories like that, but it's a long, it's whatever. But I still do have a couple teams that are Fields and Lamar. And I can tell you right now, I'm going Justin Fields over Lamar this upcoming week until these numbers come back down to earth a little bit. But we haven't seen anything like this since Michael Vick. He's running for 175 rushing yards on 15 attempts 2 weeks ago. He comes back with 150 rushing yards on the ground, designed runs. I mean, there's no way you can walk away and put a bench player like that at the quarterback position. So no, Justin Fields, and I don't even have a problem if you started Justin Fields over Jalen Hurts right now. You got to go with the hot hand. So other than Allen and Mahomes locked in, Justin Fields is right there at 3, possibly 4.
So for me, I would probably rate. I think that top 4 right now is pretty clear. I think Fields has the higher ceiling than Hurts. Fields it's his show. He's ripping off the long runs. I mean, Hurts, you have in the context of the offense, he's doing it. So I think it's Fields has just shown this incredible ceiling, and 100%. I would start him over anybody in football against Atlanta this week in the revenge game against the team that he wanted to draft him. He's from Georgia. Yeah. I think Fields is going to go absolutely nuts. So it's just unbelievable. Shout out to the chat. Chat is lit right now. We'll go around the horn. What should 1912 Fantasy do? Are you playing the matchups when you have Joe Burrow, who's put up tremendous stat lines? We would all agree, Burrow's somewhere in that top 6 or 7 range for starting quarterback. Are you going to play the matchups if you have a 2-quarterback champagne problem like 1912, or are you just rolling with Justin Fields? Start with ABiB on that.
Yeah, I'm playing the matchups, and I kind of look through Fields' matchups, and most of them say that I'm likely starting Fields more times than not. What I'm not doing is dropping any of these players. We're getting into the money weeks, and quarterback position is turning into the tight end position, where there's not a lot of them. There's the haves and the haves not. You don't want your opponent having a quarterback. I mean, I start off, in these high stake leagues drafting 1 quarterback, and then I study those first 2 weeks like none other, and then I pick up a 2nd quarterback, and then sometimes a 3rd. And it just so happened that this was the year where there's not a lot of them on the waiver wire where you can just plug and play and, comfortably expect 20+ points. So yeah. I don't want to, especially with when Chase comes back, you don't want to be going up against Burrow. Just, do what you can. There are a lot of players that I think we fell in love with early in the season and we want to see them produce. Drop those guys. I'm dropping a couple Wan'Dale Robinson shares. I love the player, but hey, I'm not. I'd rather carry 2 or 3 quarterbacks and keep away and play defense than hold on to a Wan'Dale Robinson and players like that.
A 12-point week from Wan'Dale is not going to hurt you as much as a 40-point week from the guy you might drop. Chris, how would you handle the Burrow Fields conundrum?
Oh, I wouldn't even say it's close right now. I'm going Justin Fields, not even thinking about twice. See, what happens here a lot of time is we fall in love with names. Just like Lamar Jackson. Oh my God, I got Lamar Jackson. How can I sit Lamar Jackson for Justin Fields? How can I sit Joe Burrow for Justin Fields? Throw that out the window. We're going into week 11. I want production. And Joe Burrow without Jamar Chase right now compared to Justin Fields breaking off, running 15 times a game for 150 yards, besides what he's doing in the air. I don't even think it's close between a Fields and Burrow. So I'm going Fields all day long. Come talk to me again when Jamar Chase comes back for Joe Burrow. Then maybe I can say, all right, Fields has a tough matchup here, and see what Burrow is playing that week. But for right now, it's Fields over Burrow if I had that issue.
I'll agree with you. I think you got to ride the hot hand there with Fields. Dan, how about you?
Yeah, same thing. And I just want to say real quick on Chicago. I've been playing fantasy football since 1990, and I don't think I've ever seen a coaching staff pull a midseason switcheroo like this in all that time. I mean, I'm stunned. Basically they came off of a Thursday night game, and then the following Sunday, all of a sudden the offense is completely different. I mean, they could not have been more wrong the first 4 or 5 weeks, whatever it was. Could not have been more wrong with how they were running the offense, how they had it set up. They were just not playing to any of field's strengths, anything. And then they turned it around, and they could not be more right. I mean, how does this even happen? I'm still just stunned and amazed.
It's one of the craziest things I've ever seen, a team doing a 180 like this, where we were all on Twitter, fantasy Twitter, get rid of all your Bears shares. This is a nightmare. It was after that 12-7 Thursday night game versus Washington. That was week 4 or 5. Yeah. It was like we've all seen enough. It's 4 weeks of pain, and get rid of everybody. And then as soon as we all drop these Komet shares, field shares, it was liftoff time. So, does this hurt us down the road with one of our biggest issues as fantasy players is holding on too long to players that aren't producing early in the season, right? We face this every time. And what's always the answer? Hey, get out before it's too late. Get rid of the shares, admit we're wrong, and move on. And usually that's what I like to do too. And I did it in this instance, or we all did, and we got burned. So now, is this going to hurt us as players going forward for years to come when we want to drop that player in week 5, 6, 7 that's doing nothing, the Allen Robinsons of this year and so on and so forth, and we stop and say, but there's always that Justin Fields type. We can always get a Justin Fields or Cole Kmet type of season. It's going to be something that we always struggle with.
Yeah, I love that question. I mean, I think we it's a case by case, basis, but that's like you said, it's something that we have to think about week in and week out. And we're fortunate enough to play high stakes. So we have these 20 bench leagues. And I know a lot of the listeners, they don't have the luxury of that. So it's easy for me to say, you know what, Darnell Mooney, sit on the bench. Komet in the tight end premium league, sit on the bench, Yeah. But when you're kind of in these shorter bench leagues, it becomes harder and harder and harder. So one, try to get your leagues to increase, roster sizes. But two, I think what I'm leaning on, because, I was talking with someone about this the other day. It's like scoring's down, right? So that means the pie is smaller. But there are so many more players in the player pool from week to week. We have all the RBBCs. We have more 3-4 wide receiver sets. We got double tight ends. We got, quarterbacks coming in and out on a given week. So pie is smaller, but there are more pieces to go around. And depending on the week, we don't know who's going to eat. So one thing that I think you can try and focus on, at least as a fantasy player, that may help you out is if you feel like you're a very good evaluator of talent, man, just pick up the talented player. If you see him on the waiver wire, look, right now he's not doing anything, but I believe in his talent. I'm going to pick him up. And I started doing that kind of halfway through the season. And then all of a sudden, oh, wow, I picked, and it was, of course, it's on, teams that need it. Like I had teams where I, drafted maybe Russell Wilson, and I'm like, I need another quarterback. I don't know. Okay, Fields is out there. Who knows? Maybe, right. Because I believe in, some of his talent. And you start accumulating talent, and sure enough, that, cream rises to the top, or the situation presents itself. So, but yeah, that's such an interesting dynamic. I mean, because last year was Amon-Ra St. Brown. If you drafted him or kind of held on, how long were you holding on to him before you dropped him? And then he came out of nowhere. So those situations are so hard.
Yeah, I think for me, it's I won't be so quick to judge new coaching staffs, because I think that it took Eberflus a little bit longer. And for actually, you can kind of make an argument with Nick Sirianni, because Nick Sirianni, we think, is one of the smartest guys in the room now. And last year, at the beginning of the year, people started buying into him as the season progressed. They made the playoffs. He did what he needed to do to win. But I think I was kind of negative towards him at the start of the season as well. So I think these new coaches, especially guys that are not necessarily the names that a Brian Daboll, who we were, kind of, everybody knew who he was. Everybody wanted him as a candidate. But some of these guys that are kind of under the radar that have a big reputation in NFL circles, they've earned that reputation for a reason. And I think we need to be a little bit more patient with them. That's kind of my takeaway. Real quick, the chat is really lit tonight. Joe Carlton's in the chat, 1912, Ray Chung. Shout out to a couple of our NFFC guys. Aaron Waldo, over Mahomes. I think he's getting back to my All-Star Fields over everyone. Not Mahomes. I was a little hyperbole.
Nobody.
Not starting anybody over.
Nobody over Mahomes.
That was a little exaggeration.
Yeah.
And congrats to you on all your money, Aaron, for having a Mahomes Fields team. But we have a question in the chat. How are we treating Deshaun Watson? Go real quick around the horn. Where would you rank him as soon as he comes back? Dan?
I'm not ranking him super aggressively because honestly, he's been out of the game for a year and a half. I'm going to want to see it. He's going to be playing in Cleveland in the winter, basically, which is not exactly Houston in a dome. So I know he can play in those conditions, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, he's been away from the game for a long time. I expect some time to knock the rust off, and so I'm not too worried about it. I don't have him on any of my my redraft teams, and I'm totally fine with that.
ABiB, you've been a Watson guy in the past.
Mm-hmm.
How high do you think he'll be this season? You consider him a QB1, a potential top 6 quarterback? I mean, where do you see him falling when he starts his first game?
So again, I think it's more so just a knock on the overall QB market as itself. I think he's just he's going to naturally rise to like a QB1. But I'm with Dan. I want to see it first. And his first game is against the Texans, and they're not necessarily the greatest passing matchup because they're a run funneling defense. So Chubb and Hunt or whoever's back there is going to run for 500 plus yards. But I want to see it first. That'll be a good game for him to kind of, get him some play action pass, get some easy reads, first reads, have, ideally some one-on-one matchups, get his feet wet, and then I'll see it. I am picking him up, though. If he's not available in a lot of high-stake leagues on the waiver, but he is someone that, I'm adding to most benches where, the team that, is not Mahomes or Allen. He's a guy that I kind of just want waiting in the wings, and he's someone who could potentially, also be a differentiator in tournaments as well. So,
how about you, Chris?
Yeah, I also agree. I think he could struggle, but you know what? If you don't have one of those top 6 guys, the Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Fields, Tua, and a Burrow, Herbert type right there, and you're getting by with streaming quarterbacks or whatever, and you think you're going to the playoffs, it's the absolute right move you have to make. You have to hope he comes back. I think he'll be a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Once he knocks off the rust, he's going to come back. Week 13 and 14, maybe it takes those 2 weeks to shake the rust off. Then you put him right in there for the fantasy playoffs. He can help you out on the ground. And at this point in the season, if you give me a quarterback that's going to give me that rushing upside like he is, as well as what the quarterback landscape looks like, yeah, that's an ad that I want, and I think he'll be that 8 to 10 overall quarterback rank the last 5 weeks of the season.
Yeah, that's kind of where I would have him. I think he's going to end up finishing as like a top 8 quarterback in his starts. I think he's a very talented guy. We've seen, Dan, you bring up the fact that he's been away from football, but he hasn't been taking hits. So I think sometimes these guys come back a little healthier, and I like his weapons. I think DPJ is coming on. Mark Cooper has his weird splits, but he definitely is flashed this year. Njoku should be back, and I think the fact that there's a tremendous running back next to him is going to help him and take a little pressure off him as well. And the good thing, guys, is there'll be nobody in the media at all will be following, Deshaun Watson against Houston the first week, and that'll be no media scrutiny at all with that guy. At all.
I think the best thing with Watson is how quickly is he going to get the chemistry with these weapons? Because if there's one team, if you gave me 1 or 2 teams that I think could lead a team to fantasy championship and offense, if you stack them, I think it's Cleveland. It might sound crazy, but if you give me Watson heading into the fantasy playoffs and I have a couple shares of a Cooper or an Njoku or a Peoples-Jones and a Cooper with Watson. This team could get hot for 3 weeks. It's an underrated, offense that's not, all glitz and glamour that people aren't. It's not the Chiefs. It's not the Bills. I'm talking one of those under the radar teams that you stack and they just go nuclear for 3 weeks and you ride them. There it is.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely bullish on those guys. Shout out to Snooze in the chat. He's saying that, he thinks that he'd say above 8. They want to look right in the trade. And even Kyler's been top 6 to 8 with poor performance. That's a good point.
I think that's a great point right there. Yeah. I mean, it's real easy to be a QB1 this year. All you need to do is be competent, really. It's just such a weird year for quarterbacks. And I also have to say, if I had the chance to add Watson, I would be adding him. Every single one of my leagues, he's already been taken. So I don't really have the chance to add him anywhere. Basically, it was, in most of my leagues, it was like week 9. It was the week to add him if you were going to get him. And I was going through bye week hell, so it wasn't happening for me. So maybe I'm just...
Mageddon was the week to get Watson. Dan's absolutely right. I think he went up, like he went from being like a 15% rostered guy in like a Yahoo format. Now he's like over 40. So if he's there in the home leagues, he's in like 100% of our high stakes formats.
It's interesting that none of us said Kyler, though, when we were just talking about our top 5-6 quarterbacks. I guess we're all down on Kyler, it seems.
I mean, I got a lot of Kyler shares.
I think that the fact that Hollywood Brown, we can go quick Cardinals thoughts off topic. Mm-hmm. I think that the fact that Hollywood's going to be back with the way that Rondale Moore is playing and the fact that he's got an alpha with DeAndre Hopkins, I think if he comes back healthy, I think that Cardinals offense could finish the year well. I think that there's some positive signs. They won the game last week without Kyler. He has a chance to get healthy, and now they have a huge game against the Niners this week. So I'm still optimistic with Kyler and that offense. How about you, Dan?
Can they turn off the microphone on Cliff's headset?
They can tune him out. It's just, think about Kyler and his 3 guys. Yeah.
That's, to me, that might be all it takes. I don't know.
ABiB.
Yeah, no, I think if we can see them in a couple of shootouts with those weapons, healthy Marquise Brown to kind of, stretch the field. Rondale Moore kind of working the short intermediate, Hopkins, being a chain mover. This shouldn't be an offense that's running through James Conner, ideally. So I'm with you. I think he could be a sneaky kind of league winner towards the back end of the year, especially if he continues to run as he has. But get that hamstring right. Sit out if you need to. Get that hamstring right.
Yeah.
Real quick in the chat, Rob Fisher, if Elijah Moore coming off of his bye week, Robert Saleh said that Elijah Moore is now going to be playing the slot. Is Robert Saleh, just full of it here, or do we have hope for my boy Elijah Moore here? Please, somebody tell me there's some hope. Start with Chris.
I'm on the ABiB plan here. I mean, if anybody's dropping him, I'm adding him because he's got talent.
Yeah.
That's all I need.
Criminal let him sit on a waiver wire.
Yeah. Theo, nobody was higher on Elijah Moore coming into this season than me. I have shares everywhere. That was my highest owned player. It's probably a reason, I look at my 5th round was pretty much a pass this year in all my drafts because that was my 5th round pick pretty much straight through. But, I didn't drop him. I'm still holding on to him. Hopefully this move to the slot turns it into something. Hey, listen, we all left Kadarius Toney for dead, and now we would love to get our hands on Kadarius Toney, right? And there's other players. We just talked about Fields, Kmet. It's been a crazy season, and who knows? Maybe Elijah Moore turns it around with this move to the slot now, and he's a 5-6 catch a game guy out of the slot.
I would give you all my fab left and some fab from next season. I'll start with 80% if you can give me a Kadarius Toney. That would be, I would love to see Elijah Moore come. I mean, that's a guy that we were huge on in the GOAT district And me personally, I have a lot of exposure to him in Dynasty and in redraft. So I would love to see him turn it around. And, sometimes when the bye week happens, these teams self-scout and they kind of get it together. And I think that the Jets, they really want to win, and I still believe in the talent. So that would be great. One guy who's on his bye week right now, who had his coming out party last week, was Rashad White. How excited should we be about Rashad White? Start with Chris.
Yeah, I'd be pretty excited coming out of the bye week with White. He starts the game over there in Germany, gets a ton of touches, looks great doing it. I would look at him coming out of the bye as an upside RB2, somewhere in between that 13 to 17 overall range right there. And he would be an automatic go right into my lineup in my RB2 spot and flex if need be. So, yeah, you wonder if, he'll get sniped at the goal line a lot, if they'll bring in Big Lenny when they get in the red zone. You'd like to see Rashad White. He could do it in the pass game. He's got 20 catches this season already. He didn't have any in this last game, so I think he ran for 105, 110 yards or something like that, but it was empty yards. Mixes in a couple catches each week, and I think he'll be a 15 to 20 point a game running back going forward. It looks like Tampa Bay wants to turn this backfield into like a 60-40 split with White being the lead guy.
ABiB.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a huge Rashad White guy coming out of college. I was kind of, took the contrarian view on that. But even with that being said, I ended up with a lot of Rashad White in drafts. I mean, just being in that situation with that quarterback and what we thought that offense was going to be, and knowing Fournette's history of, getting banged up, that was just some guy that you just saw, visions of winning you a championship. Because he was getting 80 to 90% of the touches in that backfield, during the money weeks. And so definitely, there was already talks that his role was going to increase, then whispers that he was going to be the starter. And he did start the game, what that means these days, it's kind of here or there. But I think that's big to have a rookie start the game over an incumbent veteran is not something that we should just scoff off or just not, completely ignore. Now you have Leonard Fournette, who's banged up, and you have him on their bye. If he's banged up, I mean, say he plays, but he's banged up to where he's not practicing for like a week and a half or so, that means Rashad White is getting all of these practice reps. And I'm a big proponent of that. Like, if you're kind of one of these fringe guys or you're in these questionable situations and you're the one guy that's at, on the practice field and the coaches are seeing that and they're game planning, chances are you may have that big week coming out, that buyer coming out, or that game coming out of that practice, versus if you were kind of sitting, you're a French guy and you were sitting out most of the week, you're probably going to be phased out of the offense. So I'm looking forward. I don't know who his matchup is coming out of the bye, but he's probably going to be in a lot of my starting lineups.
That's a great point, real quick, what ABiB just said. The hip pointer, Lenny catches it at the end of the game. You see him on the sideline with his hip wrapped up. He probably, if they had a game this week, you could pretty much say forget about it. We're not going to get much information from beat reporters because they're not around for the week here. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is a reason for Tampa Bay's coaching staff to say, all right, easy, Len. You're a veteran. Take a couple weeks, get healthy again. We'll turn it over to the kid, and you get weeks 12, 13, maybe even 14 out of Rashad White here before Lenny comes back. We don't know anything coming out of this bye week.
Chris froze up
once it happens, but we do going into the bye week.
Dan?
Yeah, totally makes sense. I agree. And the other thing is we're starting to see a few signs of, the Tampa Bay, if they can just get that running game going a little bit, the whole offense is just really sputtering. They've been generating a pretty good amount of fantasy points, but they're just not getting many touchdowns. And if they can up those touchdowns, then all of a sudden everything sort of starts falling into place like we thought it would at the start of the season. So, that's an offense that I've had a lot of hope for all year long. I've held tight to my Tampa pieces, and I kind of feel like every time, this could be the week. This could be the week. But I do think White might be able to do a lot to help out with that because of the way that he can catch passes. and he just looks like he's hitting the hole better, finding the crease a little bit better than Lenny. So
he looks much more explosive than Lenny has at any time this season. I mean, Lenny's had his moments where he put up a good fantasy line, but in terms of, you saw White rip off big runs, and the fact that they gave White 22 carries, I think that was really telling. So coming off of the bye, if White can get even a few targets a game to go with a nice size workload, I think, we throw around the word league winner, but being able to plug in Rashad White into your lineup is going to be super impactful. One other team in Florida is Miami. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are what they are. They're high-end wide receivers that can finish wide receiver 1 overall in any given week. There's not a whole lot of thought with their pass catchers. The running backs, though, Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert both put up big stat lines this past week. Who would you rather have rostered for the rest of the season? Start with Dan.
Look at me. I'm the captain now. That's Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, there you go.
That's true. That's Dan. I agree. Give me Wilson all day. He looks great. I knew that it was trouble in the water when Wilson got traded for. He came over, and in the first game, they both had 9 carries each.
Right.
It was like, whoa, this didn't take long at all. And then you go into the second week, and Wilson has 17 carries, looks phenomenal doing it. And Mostert had, I think, 9 carries to Wilson's 17. But listen, this is another backfield that I think it might be a little more game script dependent each week. I think when the Dolphins are leading, it'll be more carries for Wilson. Maybe if the Dolphins are trailing, Mostert will get in there. You'll see a little more Mostert. But for me, red zone, you'll see Wilson, and Wilson's the one that I want over Mostert. Wilson's another guy that I would say right there, fringe, high-end RB2, Mostert, flex type play.
ABiB.
Yeah, it's always been Wilson for me. I remember last year he was at one point was like my highest owned player. I just added him across the board. And, it was probably a little bit premature. He was coming off of the knee injury. But I just remember, he obviously didn't look that good, but everyone thought he was done. And there was just one tad bit of news that I want to give credit. I want to say it was a San Francisco, I think it was a podcast that I listened to. But they were just talking about how explosive he looked in camp. And not many people were talking about it. And I think we were all, kind of under the assumption or fell for the trap again that it was going to be Davis Price as the handcuff. And it wasn't until later in the season where I think they purposely set him out of a preseason game and we're like, no, it's Jeff Wilson. And just throughout the year when he's been on the field, I think it took him a little while to get started. And then they brought in competition and immediately you saw it, And so as soon as he got traded to Miami, I just knew he was going to take over that backfield. So I really kind of emptied the clip as far as picking him up in leagues where he was dropped. And I 100% agree, Dan. And this is an offense too. They're so explosive, so they can get ahead of games. I think that defense is going to come around where it's going to really be able to limit opponents moving forward. That was a huge trade. Hopefully their secondary is getting a little bit healthy. But if they can control games, you can have Waddle and Hill do the damage in the in the first half, and then have Jeff Wilson and probably Mostert breaking off maybe a long run here or there. Do the damage in the second half, and then everybody's happy. So. This is definitely an offense you want to be invested in.
Yeah, and shout out to Dwayne McFarland. He had Raheem some really harsh usage on Mostert. We all saw the 28% of snaps, but he only had 24% of the rushing attempts and only 25% of the route participation. So it's over. It's Jeff Wilson season.
He was fading. He was fading before the trade anyway, right. and that's why they went out and made this trade. McDaniels, he knew what he was getting with his boy Wilson coming over. I was always a big fan, just like you said, ABiB, of Wilson. People seem to knock Wilson a lot. I don't understand that. But Mostert was starting to fade before. He had that great start in the start of the season. He was pumping out those 20-point fantasy games. Then, he's not this type of bell cow that you could go to 15, 20 times a game all season long. They just jumped ship before they saw the wheels coming off the bus. They went to Wilson, and that's the guy you want going forward.
I mean, having Wilson, and I'll give a shout out to Dan. Dan was super bullish on Wilson in the offseason with the 49ers, and he's been a big fan of the talent, and I'm happy on some teams that we have Wilson. I'll give Dan a hat tip on that. I have a lot more Wilson because I sit next to Dan than I would have if I was just doing my own process. So good one on that, Dan. 3 wide receivers that are looking to make their mark on this season moving forward are Paris Campbell, who's had 3 touchdown catches his last 3 games with Matt Ryan under center. Kadarius Toney, who we've already touched upon, looks like a, let's call him an every week wide receiver 2 or flex. And Christian Watson, who just had a ridiculous game this past weekend with 3 touchdown receptions against Dallas. Who would be the one you'd want to roster rest of season moving forward? Start with ABiB.
Oh man, you start with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to eliminate Paris Campbell. I think that's an easy one. So he's out of the picture. So then it just kind of comes down to, okay, offense, who's in a better offense versus who may have the higher usage. And so I think it's kind of a coin flip, to be quite honest. With Dubs being out of the picture, it makes it a lot closer. I think if I had to put my chip on one, currently with where we are, we don't know where McCole Hardman is. We don't know where Juju Smith-Schuster is. And he's had a history of concussions. I got to give it to Kadarius Toney. I don't know how you put that genie back in the bottle. I was definitely in the camp that, okay, this was like a play towards 2023 because there were a lot of bodies in front of him. Well, those bodies have just been knocked out of the way, and he's next man up. And that's what, again, this is why you don't drop a player like that. Doesn't matter if he's 4th or 5th on the depth chart. The talent is insane and is ridiculous. But I will kind of speak on Watson a little bit in a sense that, again, Dubs is out of the picture. We had the Lazard debate, and I think when Lazard's been healthy, he's been more than useful. But even before this blow-up week, they were trying to find ways to get him involved. Anytime I see a team use a player in the bubble screen on more than one occasion, that tells me that the head coaches are like, I want to get this player the ball. Okay, I want to find a way to get this player the ball. So if they're consciously thinking that, then that means their role is likely to grow. And he's a rookie, and he was drafted in the 1st round. There's just too much going for him to not see a path towards him, really coming on as potentially a wide receiver 1. So, again, right now I'd probably say Toney, but you could ask me tomorrow and I could lean Christian Watson. And I don't care that he just had 3 or 4 targets because, I mean, that's something that could easily change over the next few weeks as long as he manages to catch the ball.
Chris.
Yeah, it would be Christian Watson for me. If it was just for this upcoming week, it would be Toney. But I think ABiB hit on a couple of points here. I think as the season goes on, after this week, I think, with the concussion to Juju, you have to expect him to come back. We're still a little up in the air with McCole Hardman, who was really coming on strong for 4 or 5 weeks before his injury. But now, it would be Watson over Toney for me for that reason. I think if we look up in 2-3 weeks, maybe Toney takes a step back in this offense. Sure, we all want pieces to this Chiefs offense with Mahomes leading it. But, Kelsey's always going to be the top guy in that offense. And if Juju and Hardman are back, Toney could slip right back into that 3rd or 4th option. Whereas, I don't know. I think Rodgers has been looking for that, wide receiver 1 to emerge. And we just saw the beginning of it here with Watson. And going forward, this whole pass offense could be, divided up with between Lazard and Watson, with Watson being, his main guy. So for me, it would be Watson for the rest of the season. I do like Paris Campbell. I think he's a solid PPR option for your fantasy team as a flex play. But he's a 3rd. He'd be distant 3rd between these 3 guys.
I'm very bullish on Toney. I'd like to see where this thing goes. And I think that the quality of the passing offense and the pass volume for me, kind of bumps Tony. I think Watson could be like Claypool was his rookie season, where, you know, he's this massive big play threat. He's a physical specimen. But I will go with Tony. I'll take the bullish approach there, that we've only seen the tip of the iceberg, and he could end up being like a wide receiver 2 rest of the season. Watson, I think, will have his touchdown moments, but I think you'll also see a couple of games here and there where, you know, the 4 for 60, those kind of score lines, which are not really going to impact it like Tony will. And I agree with Chris. I think Paris Campbell is a really nice guy to have. I mean, the proof is in the pudding with Paris Campbell. It's happened multiple times with Matt Ryan. The quality of the offense kind of lowers it, but I'm bullish on him as well. Dan, which way are you going with these 3 guys?
Yeah, so I'd put Tony at number 1. I have famously been very down on Christian Watson as a prospect. Just didn't really see it. He's being put into a role where he's doing what he does well. So that's what he's got going for him right now. But, you know, again, 3 touchdowns on 4 targets, that is a little bit fluky. That offense has been struggling. Now, you know, a player like Watson is what that offense needs to, you know, to start hitting a little bit more, because they badly need somebody to take the top off the defense. That's certainly not going to be Lazard. They tried it with Dobbs, but, you know, that's just not really his skill set either. So, you know, Watson is doing what he needs to do to maybe help jumpstart that offense, but I'd like to see it another week. Whereas Tony, my gosh, I mean, that guy is just like, he's Tyreek Hill. I mean, he's silly. You know, I'm so happy that I drafted some Tony. I'm so happy I held on to him for all this time, because I'm definitely going to be using him the rest of the way. You know, and Paris Campbell, you know, again, nice story, as you guys were saying, but you know, that offense is definitely not as good as the other 2. Campbell is more of a role player rather than a centerpiece.
Dan has famously called the Justin Jefferson catch the best catch of the. Are we calling it the millennia or the decade or the
century? Millennia. You can use either one, really.
Catch of the year is thrown out so much nowadays that you have to up it. Decade, century, whatever.
It's the catch of the year, 100%. I think that the catch of the century. That we're gonna put that, as Andrew Schellenberg would say.
So let's put it up against Odell's. I mean, let's put it up against Odell's. Odell was basically he made that catch against air. You know, he didn't have a defender draped all over him trying to steal the ball with 2 hands while he's trying to bring it in with 1 hand.
It was not 4th down.
It was not
a game deciding. Yep. Yeah, you got it. I mean, you got it. You got the argument.
Yeah, the degree of difficulty, the situation, everything. I mean, I can't think of a catch that I've seen in my lifetime that was that insane.
Around the horn, start with Dan. Is Justin Jefferson our 2023 101 in high stakes formats? And if you don't think he is, who would be the guy that you would take over him, or that, you know, has an argument for it? Start with you, Dan.
Big shocker. Yes, he is.
100%. ABiB?
Right now, yes.
Chris?
It's going to be tough. I think he's right there, top 2 with Saquon.
Saquon, that's an interesting name, because, you know, in terms of the scarcity of the running back position and kind of what he could be, I think that's an interesting one that could pick up steam. I'm going to go with Jefferson. To me, I think it's clearly going to be Jefferson, but Saquon is an interesting name. And then just quickly around the horn, Chris brought up Saquon. Is there anybody else that kind of jumps out to you, Dan and ABiB, that you'd want to throw out there as a potential argument for one, or maybe your clear cut 2? Or
I say Justin Jefferson now, because I kind of want to see, you know, obviously, you know, so much changes over the offseason, but I see a team that I could potentially see, you know, heading in the right direction, and this player, you know, really taking over the mantle as the 101 or living up to the bill is Jonathan Taylor. I had a lot of 101s this year and pretty much took CMC every single time, with the exception of one. And, you know, part of that was just, okay, Number one guy rarely repeats, so let me just bet against the odds. But the large part of that was just that Nyheim Hines was there. Okay, Hines is out of the picture now. And whoever comes in, maybe it's just Saturday, but what if they come in and they're like, this is the best offensive player on our roster. Let's get him the ball. And this O-line plays up to their ability. You could see a resurgence here. And he still plays in the division where he should be able to kind of run ramp shot, the majority of the time against the D-line, pending any major moves. So, I was out on him this year, but next year I could see myself being back in, or at least buying the discount mid-first round.
Yeah, a couple things on this. I think just like this past year when you had the 1-1 or the 1-2, it was CMC or Jonathan Taylor or Jefferson. Mm-hmm. And then you started seeing that last week, hey, I want to start because of how the draft board, plays out. I want to start my early first round pick with a wide receiver. So it's just going to be a mindset. If you get that 1-1 and you want to start going with a 0 RB build or whatever, then it's going to be Jefferson. Yeah. If you want to build off of, the running backs, I think it'll be either Saquon, CMC. I think he'll still be in the mix next year in San Francisco, depending on what goes on with Eli Mitchell. Jonathan Taylor, I think will also, play a factor in that as well. So those three guys.
Breece Hall, a healthy Breece Hall. Would you buy into that in the first round next year?
First round, I was coming off the injury. No.
Yes.
Theo, coming off the injury, no, but it could work out. I do want to throw out this name that I don't think people see it coming, but if you play it out, who would be a sneaky 1-1 overall going into next year? When Kareem Hunt is out of town and you get Deshaun Watson under center and that offensive line is healthy and the team is looking good going into next year, give me Nick Chubb with a full backfield, okay? And I wouldn't hesitate to take him right there in those first couple picks if Kareem Hunt is out of town.
And Chris, the beauty about that pick too is there's a clear handcuff or potentially a clear handcuff. Or someone who'll get a majority of the workload. And I love those situations.
Yeah.
No, it's gonna be a fun summer talking about all this. I'm very interested to see kind of where Breece Hall lands because I think he was heading towards that. He's so young that, I don't know. It's tough taking guys off of injury, but if anybody can do it.
You think he'll be a first rounder, Theo?
I think more likely than not, he's a second rounder. But I think that the hype could grow as the summer moves along and, we'll kind of see his recovery. Javonte Williams will be an interesting guy this summer as well to see kind of how he recovers. It's always fun talking about guys coming off the injury with Dan. Who's a little bit usually averse to those kind of guys, but it'll be a really fun summer. I want to quickly get to the quarterback position before we talk league winners. 62 of the top 100. This is staggering. 62 of the top 100 FFPC main event teams have either Pat Mahomes or Josh Allen as their QBs. Are we headed to a return of early QB drafting? And how high will these two guys be drafted next year in high stakes? Start with Chris.
Well, this is the question for me, guys, because if you know anything about me, throughout my course of playing high stakes fantasy football, I was always the early quarterback guy. I lived with taking Brady and Rodgers and Peyton Manning all those years early, and I continued it all up straight through, last year. And I'm kicking myself for this year jumping off that boat just simply because everybody started pushing quarterback down the draft board these last couple of years. So I said, all right, you know what? I don't need to force these guys up the draft board anymore, such as the Josh Allens. But looking back on it, I kick myself every day for these past couple months because every draft I looked at, and I passed on Josh Allen in the 4th round of NFFC drafts, passed on Pat Mahomes in 5th and sometimes even 6th round. This is my style of drafting in NFFC. If I could take an elite quarterback and I don't need to spend a second round pick on it, that should have been me all day long. And instead I pushed it down just because everyone else was pushing quarterback down. And I said, all right, that Lamar Jackson 6th round value, that Russell Wilson 9th round value. I could build. We needed our receivers in that 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds. So, we didn't want to take the quarterback position too high. But sitting back and looking back, absolutely, the quarterback position will be viewed at after this season, what we're witnessing, in a totally different light. We might go back to those years of Drew Brees and Brady and Manning's getting drafted in the 1st and 2nd rounds in these 6-point passing quarterbacks. And in the FFPC, FFWC, the 4-point passing, the Fields, the Jalen Hurts, the Lamar Jacksons. Yes, we have to look at fantasy completely differently after this year. The fantasy quarterback position can take your fantasy team to new heights every week. It's carrying teams. If you have Allen and Mahomes, I don't know how you don't win without these guys this year. If you win with other quarterbacks other than Allen, Mahomes, and Hurts, and maybe now Fields, I'll be shocked. But I could talk about this subject for days, but I'll let you guys
it's also,
take it from there.
Chris, you also bring up like the landmines that we fell on in like the 5th round. You are completely risk averse with your early pick when you take one of these guys.
Yeah.
So it's
great point.
It's the one position where we, as an industry, we really get it right is the QB position. Like usually the guys drafted as top 3 QBs, they don't fail. Maybe they'll finish QB3 finishes as QB6, but you're still getting an impactful. I think tight end and quarterback. Besides our boy Kyle Pitts, we're usually pretty right on the truly elite guys. So it's a very interesting argument.
But did we need this type of season for the whole fantasy industry all these years to poo-poo the quarterback position, right? Did we need to witness this? What we're seeing, happen. Like the whole fantasy industry. Yeah, the whole fantasy industry. Oh, wait on quarterback. It doesn't matter. And then you go out and you watch Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen drop 40 points every week. And we're sitting here with garbage in the mid rounds. Brady, Russell Wilson, Derek Carr, on and on and on, giving us 18 points, 20 points. These are difference makers. Lock in your difference maker in those rounds. And look at all the hits that we can navigate around in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th rounds at the receiver and running back position. It's just been it always mystified me how the whole industry just says the quarterback position isn't that important, whatever. It's the biggest difference maker. The most successful seasons I've had throughout the last 20 years playing high stakes is when I had big-time quarterbacks and I drafted them early, and every week it was a set and forget 35, 40 at the top of my roster, and then I'll work out everything else.
No, you're right about that. ABiB, what do you think?
I mean, I love what Chris just said. I mean, we could like literally have a 3-hour show on that. I mean, that there was just so many great points. And, it's funny because my approach over the last few years has been kind of very different. This year I saw that the quarterbacks were kind of being, pushed down, and, I was like, all right, let me just get one of these 2nd, 3rd tier guys, and ideally that would be a value. And then just leave it at that. And then if I didn't get one of those guys, maybe I draft 2 quarterbacks later. In years previously, I was just absolutely greedy. I try to identify the guy and, get lucky with the Lamar. But I would draft like 3 or 4 quarterbacks, because my mindset was kind of like yours to some degree, was this position scores the most points by far. And it's like so devalued, and people tell you why, I would just like get like laughed at for drafting like 3 quarterbacks. And I'm like, I don't care. I want to get it right. Like, I want to get it right. I want to make sure that one of these guys.
You don't have to keep 4 of them.
Exactly. Exactly. Because there's going to be so much churn anyway. But I 100% agree with you. I think, when it comes to like, understanding the change in times, that, how the game is changing and being able to incorporate that into your strategy, like, I'm 100% with you. We'll see what ends up happening and kind of what shakes out over the offseason. But as of right now, I want one of those top 3 guys. And I'm, and if Theo gets pushed up the board, I'm going to make sure that I get a Josh Allen or Mahomes, so I'm not paying the premium for Fields. But we'll see. I think that's a very, very interesting discussion. And I love that take as far as kind of how you approach quarterbacks.
Dan, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the main thing is you don't want to continue chasing after quarterback once those elite guys are gone. Like just because Allen and Mahomes are gone, that doesn't mean you want to be taking Joe Burrow in the 3rd round because both of those guys disappeared in the, So you have to figure out, who you think is really going to be the absolute elite. You can push those guys up. What we saw this year, which we hadn't seen in years past, was just the fact that the middle class of the quarterback kind of went from upper middle class to lower middle class. I mean, These guys went from driving their Audis and their Mercedes and all that kind of stuff to driving rusted out Toyotas. As far as how the offenses are going, and I don't think anybody really saw that coming. Like you could go into this year and you could, like Theo, we felt pretty good about drafting Kyler Murray in a lot of spots, right?
Felt great about it.
Yeah. But, when Kyler Murray is getting you 8 points less than Patrick Mahomes, who last year had a down year, it's obviously that was the wrong call. I mean, you wanted to have Allen or Mahomes early rather than taking Kyler Murray, in the middle of round 6 or something like that. So
yeah, I think that's you hit the nail on the head, Dan. Will the entire position be pushed up because of this? So
Right.
it's almost like tight end where you'll end up, the sharp ones will either be, you want to draft one of the first few or you wait and you hope for like a Justin Fields or a Tua.
Right.
And it's funny because
and you do it ABiB's way, and you draft 3 of them. Get it? Okay, I didn't get one of those elite guys, so dang it, I'm going to make sure I get 3 guys I feel pretty good about, and hopefully one of them works out.
It's the same exact approach that we talked about preseason when we were on this show that I think we all agreed on. It's our approach at the tight end position.
Right.
If you don't get an elite one, which, I mean, that was a mistake, waiting and not getting the elite, the Kelsey and the Andrews, as we've found out now. But if I don't get that tier and I push it down to the mid-tier, well, okay, let me get one of those and then take even 2 more guys in that 14th through 18th round. You would have hit on the Komets, the Njokus, tight ends like that. So, I'm a wait on tight end guy. I'm usually a pay up for quarterback, wait on tight end. And, there's been some hits at the tight end position, namely Njoku, who's on a lot of my teams. Unfortunately, he got hurt. But, when you block out the noise when you're at the draft table or in the draft room, the draft shaming is over. Go mind your business. I'll worry about my team. If I want to draft 4 quarterbacks like ABiB or 4 tight ends like me, that's the way I'm going to do it because I'm going to let it play out. I know the other positions are strong. That's part of the whole elite quarterback drafting strategy that I always implied was I'm locked in on my 35 points at quarterback. I got to go figure out another position, and I'll go figure out my tight end down the road. And I'm going to hit on one of these 3 or 4 guys I draft from rounds 12 through 20. And then you're going to have to really compete with me because I'm going to have that sleeper tight end with my elite quarterback, and I should have good running backs and receivers in the middle.
Well, we've hit almost an hour and a half here. We always go over whenever you guys are in the district because you bring such fire. And we really appreciate your guys' time, especially with all the waivers we've got to put in tonight. Talk about our league winners. It's funny because when Matt and Michael were on, we asked the exact same question. And then when Bip and Billy were on, we asked the exact same question. So it's kind of like a stock market where it changes and changes. Who are some of the guys that you anticipate being on overall title winner rosters? You can go as obscure as you want, or you can give some big names. Why don't we start with ABiB on this one? We'll put you on the spot again, champ.
Yeah. So the obvious one, I think, is kind of who we mentioned earlier, which is Rashad White. I do feel like, I don't know, I get the sense this Tampa Bay offense is, about the peak, about to hit its stride. Brady's obviously been through a lot. Some of the guys have been coming back from injuries. And, they've been dealing with drops. They've, had this kind of shuffling of the O-line. Sometimes that takes time to gel. And they got, the luxury of having a late bye or not the luxury of having an early bye. So I think coming out of the bye, with what I saw last week, I think this offense could really hit a stride. And if it does, and he's able to take over that role, or Leonard Fournette gets hurt, he's an easy league winner. And then some of the more obscure names, for the most part, I think, we kind of know who a lot of these younger wide receivers are. Some of the guys are, coming on. I don't think Ben Skoranek is a league-winning wide receiver, so I'm going to lean on running back again for the obscure names. It's going to be, potentially Kyrie or Kyron Williams. As bad as that offense looks, because of what he can provide in the passing game, if we see the other guys phased out, or even one of the guys phased out, and see him take over a majority of the role with no Cooper Kupp, I mean, he can eat up a lot of the underneath work. And it was limited. It was limited work, but the 6 targets that I saw from him he just looked natural, so much more natural than the other guys, coming out of the backfield catching passes. And then the last guy, when are you posting this?
It is live. It is live, ABiB.
Okay, hopefully nobody's listening.
You can refrain from naming a
I'm
guy.
sure he's
All
on.
right, everybody in the chat, can you please?
Deontay Ingram.
Yeah, everybody in the chat needs to mute.
Yeah.
Just mute
ABiB did not just
sound.
drop Keontae Ingram as the overall. There you go, everybody. You know who you're bidding on this week.
I'm not bidding that
That's
much.
great.
Don't go crazy.
The range of outcomes. Keontae could go nuts in the fantasy playoffs. I wrote about Keontae. I talked about Keontae today on the Waiver Wire show. It's like, he looks good. I love that call. Chris, give us some league winners.
We talking top of the line elite winners, or
However you want to go.
Top of the line guys. I think real quick, it's going to be tough to win without Kelsey or Andrews or the quarterbacks we just mentioned, those big 4. Okay, I think that the 2 offenses that you might see the stack, like Cincinnati last year, where Burrow and Chase and Higgins, they were under the radar and blew up in the fantasy playoffs and carried it. Miami with the Tua, Waddle, Hill stack, and then Watson, like we talked about, with an Amari Cooper and maybe Njoku at tight end. Those are going to be some of the big names I think you'll see on winning teams, but under the radar sleeper type guys that I think could come on really strong. Antonio Gibson is one, and I bring his name up because I think J.D. McKissic is about to hit the IR. He's got this neck issue. He's seeing specialists. It sounds like an IR situation. And if that's the case, Antonio Gibson could be a big-time PPR back down the stretch, give you 15, 20 fantasy points in that offense a week. So he could help you, along with, a guy we mentioned earlier, Jeff Wilson, I think is somebody that, you could take off your bench, bring him into your starting lineup, and he can be big for teams, as well as Gus Edwards. I know I was excited to get Gus Edwards back, and then he got the hamstring issue now going into the bye week. But I won't be shocked if they come out of the bye week. We know what the Ravens want to do. They want to pound the ball. Their schedule is beautiful the rest of the way, and they should be favored and up big. Gus Edwards could be one of these running backs that gets 15 carries for 100 and a touchdown or 2 every week. So those are some running backs and a couple receivers I'll throw under the radar. I don't know about this, how much I love this. Jamar Chase is still on crutches. So Tyler Boyd, I think, could be big for teams down the stretch, as well as Garrett Wilson for the Jets.
So I'll agree with you with Kelsey. I think that everything's kind of setting up for Kansas City. I think those Mahomes, Kelsey, it's very chalky, but I like their playoff schedule. And I'll also say that some of the ancillary pieces, like the Tonys, maybe a Pacheco, you're going to want Chiefs in the playoffs. They have that Denver Broncos game, which would be in the championship week. And as long as they're not sitting guys, I could see them just really putting a number on Denver. I'll throw out Ken Walker. I think Ken Walker, the fact that he was completely shut down in the run game and was still able to, salvage this past week just as a receiver. He's coming off. He's got the bye week this week. I mean, I think that, you have to treat him as, a top 5 kind of running back moving forward. And, those would be kind of my guys. And if we do see the big impact from Deshaun Watson, I think Donovan Peoples-Jones could be a guy that could get loose and have some Will Fuller-like deep touchdowns in the fantasy playoffs. That's one I have my eye on. Dan?
Yeah, so you guys stole all my guys, but Travis Kelce. I mean, my God, he's over doubled the point output of the number 6 tight end. I mean, it's just sick.
Wrong for fading him again. I don't know if you guys did it, but I was wrong for fading him.
My best high stakes Kelce team was also a Kupp team, so you can pour one out for me tonight. But
there you go. Yeah,
it's Kelce's. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I like Kenny Walker a lot. I think Travis Etienne. Has sure looked good. Mixon has really been coming on as well. So there may be something there, but I think those are kind of your main guys at running back. Who maybe weren't drafted quite as high. Quarterback, it's definitely Mahomes. I mean, the Kansas City has no running game. I mean, the answer to who is Kansas City's running back is nobody. It should be who cares. So I think when you've got Mahomes or you've got Josh Allen, like Chris was saying, that's a cheat code. And if you can pair them up with, put a Kenny Walker and a Travis Etienne and
that's the combo right there, Dan. You hit it, and that's what I just wanted to say. Listen, the whole first round was a hit this year, other than Jonathan Taylor, pretty much, who hurt you as a top 1 or 2 pick. But after you got out of the first round, you build on, the rest of your drafts. You're going to see a combination of all those first round guys, an Eckler, a Barkley, a Jefferson. That's going to be the standard. After that, I think you hit on the guys, Walker, ETN, and I want to throw in Nick Chubb, because these are the 3 big running backs that, it's funny. ETN was the worst 3rd round draft pick you could have made through the first 5 weeks of the season. And now we look back after the 10th week, he's the best 3rd round pick you could have made. So ETN and Walker and Chubb, I think those 3 running backs you're going to see on, all championship rosters. One of those 3 you're going to need to take your team over the top.
Yeah, and I'll throw out one more crazy one at wide receiver, Tyler Lockett. I mean, that guy is as well as he's done, and he's top 10. He has missed some opportunities where he's been just barely out of the. His foot came out just barely on the white, or he inexplicably dropped a pass that he would normally catch. I mean, he could be about wide receiver 4 or 5 right now if things had broken just a little bit differently. So he's a guy I think could definitely catch fire throughout the second half of the year. And I mean, Seattle is definitely throwing it up to him. I mean, he's been the guy more so than DK Metcalf, really.
And Dan, that's funny. That's the underdog bros would always bring up that Seattle Jets game as like the joke one that they were stacking, and someone could potentially win a ton of money on stacking that game correctly, because that Seattle team, that Seattle Jets game, that could have playoff implications the last week. And we talk about if you would have gone Walker, Lockett, Geno, I mean, you could potentially have something there.
What offense was a bigger fade and a bigger stay away than Seattle in August and early September? We didn't want to go anywhere near it, and Lockett was probably the best value on the board, along with Kenny Walker, both guys that you got after the 10th round.
In 10 years or so, we will really, really enjoy the 30 for 30 on Geno Smith season. It'll be one of the better ones ever, because it's that's a whole Goat District special, to go over just, how awesome Geno has been this year. And he's going to get a massive contract too. They're going to go with him for another year, and he deserves it too. So you love to see it. But we're at an hour and 38 minutes here. ABiB, remind everybody where they can find you.
Twitter at Skywalker2000, podcast at First and 15th, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.
And putting out big bids on Keontae Ingram.
You better raise those bids.
You'll find ABiB rising it up maybe 11% now, just because he revealed his love of Keontae. Chris, where can they find you, and when is your pod dropping?
You could get me on Twitter, Chris Vaccaro, GST. That's after the Greenwich Street Tavern, my bar in New York City. Come through if you're in Manhattan, downtown Tribeca. And then at The Athletic, the podcast and the article drops. Podcast drops on Wednesday mornings, and the article drops on Thursday mornings.
Awesome.
Yep.
Dan, awesome show.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, this was great. Could have gone on for another couple hours, I think, easily, but
100%. 100%. We'll have to get you guys back on as soon as the season's over. Tune in Thursday. We have Scott Spratt coming on. First time he's been in the district. Scott has been putting out some great content with Nelson Sousa this year. He does a start-sit article on FTN that I really enjoy. And we're going to go with Scott and talk about our own start-sits and hopefully help you win this week. Thanks for tuning in tonight, and everybody have a great night.